I used to work in a motorcycle shop. One day last year, a man brought in a fire red 1997 Suzuki TL1000S. It was in great condition, but he claimed something was wrong with the wiring. I told him I would have a look, but since I was in the middle of working on another customer's bike, it would have to sit in the garage for a couple of days. The man seemed glad to be leaving it, turned around and left. Now, this particular bike has a little bit of a bad reputation, so I figured, like many other overly confident riders, he'd bought himself a bike that was too much for him. The next morning, I walked into the shop and the headlight was on. Nothing was near the bike and nothing had disturbed it. The key was in the ignition, but wasn't turned on, so that wasn't causing the light to illuminate. As soon as I cycled the ignition, the light went out. Then I headed towards my workstation and started preparing for the day. After a long day, I was heading home when I noticed the light was on again. At this point, I figured it must really have an electrical problem. So I looked it over, traced all the wiring, wiggled everything that was wiggleable, couldn't find any faults. This time I took the key out and put it in the rack and headed home. Next morning I arrived to see the shop covered in smoke, as if one of the bikes in the shop had been running. Quickly opened all the garage bays and started checking each vehicle. When I finally got to the TL1000, I could tell it had been running. I asked the owner of the shop, who had just walked in behind me, if he had started the bike. He said no, he had just gotten there. I asked him if he was messing with me, but he didn't answer me. I told him that I'd be working on the bike today and would hopefully find the problem. Later that day, I finally got around to working on the bike. Oh, it was in such great condition that I couldn't help but admire it. Not one thing was wrong with it. I called the owner and told him it was ready, and he came and picked it up, and that was the end of it. Until the bike came back. It had been months, and I had pretty much forgotten about the bike until one day a different guy came in with it. He spoke to the shop owner, claiming it had some kind of mechanical issue. A little while later, I walked into work, and it was parked right next to my workstation. So I figured the boss must have placed it there. I was getting ready for the day, and when he walked by and said, "Cool, you found the bike outside. I was just about to ask you to go get it and check it out." I told him I didn't put it there, and he said neither did he. He told me a different guy had brought it in, but he was positive it was the same bike we'd looked at a few months back. He shrugged and said the old owner must have wised up and sold it. After looking it over for a while again, I could not find anything wrong with the beautiful bike. Once more, I couldn't help but admire it. After a bit of time, I called the owner and asked if the previous owner might have any ideas about what was wrong with it. The man told me the previous owner was his brother. They had died in a crash on that bike. I looked over at the bike with a smirk on my face. It was in great condition. I told him the bike didn't have a scratch on it, so there was no way his unfortunate brother could have wiped out on this particular bike. I told him it was fine, so he could pick it up whenever he was ready. The man kept insisting the bike had issues and asked me to test drive it. Now, we didn't normally test ride bikes unless the owner gave us permission, so I enthusiastically said yes and got my gear ready. I hopped on the bike and headed down the road. I was taking it easy at first, but it wasn't long before I was opening up the throttle and letting it roar. I loved every minute of it. Normally, a guy like me wouldn't be able to afford a bike like this. Before I knew what was happening, it was like the bike took control of itself and was headed down the highway at triple-digit speed. I didn't even fight for control of the bike. I thought maybe that's what happened to the original owner. I let it take the lead, and it was amazing. After a couple of hours together, I finally brought it back to the shop with the intention of buying it off the owner at an affordable price. I called him back and told him the bike seemed fine, but could have hidden problems that could be costly later on, and that I would buy it off him. He refused, said he was on his way to pick it up. When he arrived, I begged him to sell it to me. I told him the bike wanted to be with me. He angrily said no, hopped on the bike, and rode away. I yelled for him to stop. He ignored me. That was the last time I saw that man, but not the last time I saw that bike. Weeks passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The TL was something unspeakable. There was so much adrenaline running all over my body when I rode. It was an incredible sensation. I had to have it. At night, I would have dreams of the original owner crashing on the bike, which were soon replaced by nightmares of the new owner's death. And suddenly it was back at the shop, again with a new owner, but not a scratch on it. I didn't even let him get a word in because I already knew why he was there. Came to sell the bike? I asked. He replied, no, it just has some problems I wanted checked out. Of course it does, I said. A bike like that is bound to have constant problems. Fast bikes need fast riders to take control of them. Otherwise, the bike might not want to be with you, and you'll end up like the two previous owners. He looked at me in confusion. By the end of our conversation, he had pretty much given up on riding and was glad to sell me the bike at a price of my choosing. My boss was so mad at me for what I'd done, he fired me on the spot. Not only did I make a fellow rider quit, but I also chased away a client while profiting off of him. I didn't care. I had to have it. And now it was all mine. I hopped on the bike and rode away. I never went back to that shop.